Well, I guess I'm Sahil again, and I'm a conservation anthropologist. And the story that I'm telling today is the story of a tiger. His name is GP, and it intersects with the story of a community that I've lived and worked with for 12 years. They're indigenous to the Eastern Himalayan mountains. And the story also includes a researcher. And finally, our ideas about development and conservation. So let me introduce you to GP. GP is the protagonist of the story. He was the first tiger I ever met in the Dibang Valley. And he lives in a village called Ichigu, which is deep inside the mountains of Eastern Himalayas in the territory of the Idumishmi people. And in January 24, GP appeared in one of my camera traps. He, at that time, was about a little older than 2 years old. He was a curious, slightly shy, yet brave, risk-taking teenager. He came around, sniffed the stumps of the bamboo that we had cleared to put the camera trap, cautiously came up to the camera trap, investigated, then determined it was okay, and then kind of moved on. But GP did something really interesting. He then decided, a few days after sniffing the camera trap in his natal village, to undertake a long journey north. So he set off from the village down the Ichigu, over the high passes, into the river valley, and then over again into the high passes, to the village of Etabe. And I just happened to put a camera trap in Etabe, and there he was, again, saying hello. And he was, again, a little cautious, curious, as teenagers are. But he didn't like Etabe very much. I don't blame him. My best friend and my arch nemesis is from Etabe. I have a contentious relationship with her, and he had a contentious relationship with Etabe, so he decided to march back to Ichigu. He returned a year later, where there was another camera trap in the village, where he was again photographed. But this time, a year later, he returned larger, more magnificent. He had more experience, and he didn't really care about camera traps anymore. He had learned that they're just there. So that's this journey that GP took was quite, this is something that tigers do when they're young and they want to explore. They reach out, they explore their areas, and they kind of move around. So nothing extraordinary there. Another thing that he did was he crossed that river. Something tigers do. But in crossing that river, not once, but twice, GP were to change the history of the area. And this is that story. And I want you to remember that river. It's called Talo. It's a river that kind of defines the people that live in these mountains. So let me take you to this area and tell you a little bit more about what makes these mountains home for tigers and the Idu people. So we're in northeast India, over there. In the state of Arunachal Pradesh. The northern part of Arunachal Pradesh shares a border with Tibet and China, and the eastern part shares a border with Burma, Myanmar. Dibang Valley is kind of over there, since we're in ex-Europe, for reference, or Europe. The Dibang Valley is half the size of Belgium. It's a very large area, and it's a spectacular place. It starts with rich tropical grasslands in the south, and they rise up into tropical forest. These mountains summit in high elevation lakes that are covered in snow most of the year. They're fabulous places. These are the places, these high elevation passes, and are places where spirits, animals, people all meet when the snow melts, and gives rise to profusion of different belief systems around what is a human, what is an animal. And it's the ancestral homeland of the Idumishmi people. The Idu people call themselves the people of 12 river basins. These are 12 tributaries of Talo, the main river that flows, that GP crossed. And there are several clans within the Idu, about 70 or so. Idu people are traditional animists. Animists believe that Spirits, mountains, animals, people all have intentionality, consciousness, and a sense of self. All aspire, all dream, all make worlds, not just people. The world of the animus is, full of things that are thinking and believing and changing all the time. So decision making has to account for everything that things around you. There are about 13 to 14,000 Idu people, which makes it the lowest dense human density area in all of country, a country that's very highly densely populated. What is quite remarkable about the Idu people is their relationship with the tiger, like GP. There's an ancestral tale that talks about how people and tigers were born to the same ancestral couple, and therefore they're brothers. And a twist of fate, and the human brother decided to kill the tiger brother. That gave rise to an ancestral curse that still haunts the Idu till today. So killing a tiger is an act of homicide. You do not do it. And if you do it, you go through very lengthy rituals to cleanse. And sometimes the cleansing is not successful. And the cleansing is done by shamans, the mediators between the spirit, the animal, and the human world. Some powerful shamans are able to do and cleanse the scourge, the curse. Others are not. And so it's common that people, if they encounter a tiger and kill it, that their families then have to suffer, or they die in unfortunate instances. And it's in this area, through a combination of anthropology and ecological techniques, that I did my PhD and found that these complex cultural beliefs had led to a tiger population thriving in the Dibang Valley. Around 2014-15, there were up to 50 adult tigers in this area. That was at that time higher than number of tigers in 60% of the tiger reserves in the country that were protected by the government, using the tools of protection that governments usually use: fences, guns, guards. And in this area, away from scientific gaze, away from the gaze of the conservation community, tigers and Idu people were developing intimate relationships and keeping them. I finished my PhD, and the Dibang Valley began to change. Proposals were floated for 17 mega dams in the Dibang Valley, and 2 of the areas, ones to the north and to the south, were declared protected. And so this continuum of life, continuum of culture and human-animal relations was being broken up into zones of development and zones of conservation. And this is where we come back to GP's story, because the river that GP crossed twice, India's largest dam, was proposed there. And it was then sent to the top committee in the government for approval. All infrastructure projects that require diversion of forest land have to be approved by this intergovernmental committee. And when there, I got to know about it. I was still a PhD student. I decided to write GP's story into a letter and send it to the committee. So I did. But when the committee was reviewing the proposal for the dam, they had a thick copy of a report that the dam proponents had submitted to them. It's called Environmental Impact Assessment, in which they had determined that there were no endangered species in the Dibang Valley, and no ecological impacts were to be had because of the dam that couldn't be reversed. Well, GP's story was different. He was there. He was crossing the river, and clearly that was his home. And it was the home of many Idu clans that lived in that river. But this letter had an impact. The committee decided that they needed to know more. So they commissioned a study on tigers. Oh, already? Oh, okay. GP is complex. The story is long. Yeah, okay. I'm going to hurry up. The team from the Government Research Institute arrived, and they encountered the massiveness and the greenness of the Dibang Valley. And they traveled 270 kilometers through these dense, forests, mountains, through several Idu villages. And they arrived right at the border of that red boundary, where the protected area began. And they decided that that's where they're going to do research. So 75% of their camera traps were in this imaginary border because they determined that's where tigers should be because, we're drawn that border on the map. And about 25% of their effort were in community areas outside, and a few cameras they put around the villages and the roads where the dam was going to be put. The study lasted a few years, and then they found 4 adult tigers inside the wildlife sanctuary, and in the very heavily under-surveyed community areas, they found 3 tigers. And in the 25 days that the cameras were there in the dam area, they found no tigers. They published 2 reports that concluded that tigers only lived in the highest parts of the Dibang Valley, above 3,500 meters, and then there were no tigers in any of the areas that will be impacted by dams. Therefore, it was okay to dam the area. And they asked for a little bit of money to do research on tigers after the dam has been built. But while my letter caused consternation and the research happened, some elites in the area, some Idu elites, also took note of my letter. And they were not happy. They'd been acquiring land over a period of years, which they wanted to sell to the dam companies in return for huge amounts of monetary compensation. And so they also wrote the letter to the same committee, not questioning the presence of tigers because they couldn't. Tigers are everywhere. Tigers have always been there since the Idus have been there. It's a fact that every Idu knows. But they questioned the validity of the research. About the dam still lies in a limbo. It's been 7 years since the letter was sent. It's yet to be constructed. But they're moving ahead with plans of a tiger reserve. So that can happen as early as next week. And it's not, and the tiger reserve, like I said, will be declared in the tops of the mountains, right where the snow is. The valleys will be kept free for more development. And tigers clearly don't know these boundaries, they're free-willed, agentic beings, and they go as they wish. But the government wants to hide these tigers. They don't want the tigers visible, but they want the tiger reserve, because tiger reserve will bring in federal conservation dollars to the state government, not to protect tigers, but to create more schemes. The Idus predominantly don't want the tiger reserve. And the argument is, we know how to live with them. Our culture protected them. Why do you want a tiger reserve when we already are living with them? Go build it somewhere else where there are no tigers. And the history of tiger reserves in Arunachal, in that state, is that tiger reserves cause tiger extinction. And so most Idus are against it. Most Idus, though, are not against the dams, like I said. There's a split in the community. But predominantly, the Idus do not want neither dams nor the tiger reserve. But again, there is variation in the community. Now, to close, there's a few things that I wanted to reflect on, which is, tigers continue to pop up everywhere, wherever they want. The tops of the mountains, this guy, again, a young male, explored the top of the mountain summits there. It's 4,000 meters. And so they make it difficult in this landscape that's vertical and dense and cultural. They make it difficult to delineate boundaries of the land. This is where the dam should be. This is where the tigers should be. They go where they want. And they are actually the ones that are dismantling our ideas of how landscapes and animals should behave. But again, it also questions, whether this is coexistence and conflict. There is, tigers come into villages. Tigers have always been coming into villages, and they predate on cattle. How am I doing with time? Done? Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. I like to talk. I'm an anthropologist. Well, they come into the villages. They've always been killing cattle. And people get angry and emotional. Cattle is life. Cattle are also persons, and they're important. But despite the anger and the emotion, you find ways of dealing with it. You find ways of dealing with that. You process it. It's also ancestrally mandated. That's how it's supposed to be. I killed a tiger. all those years ago, so it's going to come and take what's mine now, because that's how the world is. It's neither conflict nor coexistence, it's how the world is. It's how the world was made. It's how tigers were made, it's how people were made. And so again, it kind of questions that. Finally, I want to reflect about my own positionality in this. I'm not an Idu myself, and my godfather is from that community. And I'm not an inert researcher that went there to get objective science and objective data. I'm an equal participant in this story. I drove a lot of the story. So we don't do objective science. And the fact that you keep talking about very easily about, I'm going to do field work, where is field? And field is home to tigers and people. And we make it field. We make someone else's home our field, and by that we distance ourselves from the responsibility of our actions. And I think there's a lot to think about there, and our own moral implicity in it. Okay, thank you. And I will take one question.
Interesting. Okay. Is it possible to build wildlife corridors and like passageways around the dam so tigers can be facilitated from one area to another?
Is it possible to build corridors?
Yes.
I guess. Oh, sorry.
I mean, if it's possible to break that landscape up into 17 dams and conservation reserves, it's possible to build corridors, but do we need to build corridors? Are they needed?